Well, this has been Frederick here. I'm delighted to have a special guest with me today. Wendi Irlbeck is a registered dietitian nutritionist, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But the reason for this interview is that in all the different things that we're seeing covered during this time, there really hasn't been a lot of focus on ways that we can fortify mind and body for some of the challenges that we have, the reality of COVID, certainly the stressors that we are seeing coming at us each and every day. So I'm delighted that Wendi could come and share her expertise a little bit with us in the greater Mid-Michigan community and any other viewers who want to come and watch this. So welcome, Wendi. And would you please tell us first, what is a registered dietitian nutritionist? This is kind of new for a lot of people and would love to know more about your profession.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for having me, Ben. And it's a great opportunity to talk about wellness and health and nutrition. So let's just jump right into it. A registered dietitian nutritionist is a food and nutrition expert. They have undergone special training, a undergraduate degree in which they have completed didactic courses, and then also a master's degree of extensive training in food and nutrition. They've also gone and done 1,200 hours or more of supervised practice hours and sat for a national registration exam, in which then upon completing that exam, they have to complete 75 continuing education credits within 5 years. So everyone can be a nutritionist, but not everyone can be a registered dietitian nutritionist. So it's really great that we can really look to the experts, especially now during these challenging times of getting the credible evidence-based information for the best interests of our health moving forward.
Yes, indeed, and glad to have your expertise. I guess the question for me would be, what kind of got you sparked into this as a calling, as a profession?
Yes, I've always been fascinated with nutrition, and before I got involved in high school athletics, just the overall interaction and how it makes us feel. Of course, all science aside, I didn't know as a young child that certain foods I ate had an influence on my mood, my cognition, my ability to interact with my family, and then overall energy levels. I grew up out in the country, southeastern Minnesota, on the farm. So we ate to fuel our workouts, our workouts, i.e. training, as far as our chores and things like that. So I was really fascinated that when I would eat Doritos and pizza, I tend to feel less energized as when I was having fruits and vegetables and good quality meats with my family. So I started to connect the dots, and then I started doing research as a 13-year-old looking at macronutrients, and I saw, wow, there really is a direct connection with the foods that we're eating and our mood, our cognition, even mental health. So that was something that was fascinating. From there, I just took it, and ever since a child, I've gotten my hands on anything physiology, health, nutrition, and I've read it, and I just love helping people, and I want other people to feel energized. I want people to feel empowered. So that's really what I pride myself on.
Well, I love interacting with anybody that really has a calling more than a profession, and some of the energy and passion that you bring to this is very inspiring. Really, let's just kind of dive in. I mentioned earlier at the beginning of some of this is born out of our own conversations together about what is being missed in the conversation at the state level or nationally. For people, just practical advice. We hear a lot about personal protective things. We hear a lot about safety, protocols, isolation. Up until very recently was a reality for 70 days for many Michiganders. And there's still many who are fearful that still are isolating somewhat, or maybe in a vulnerable situation. So why not to focus on wellness, and what are some broad stroke things that we should be thinking about to fortify mind and body?
Absolutely. So it's been a really challenging time, and many people are dealing with it in ways that they've never dealt with before. And sometimes it's led us down the road of feeling isolated, in which then our mental health suffers. So, just some practical strategies in coming out of this is wellness, right? And getting proper sleep, getting back into a routine that works well for you, and having some grace that, we likely haven't slept, we haven't ate, we haven't exercised as well as we'd like to, but now we have that opportunity to do so. So taking 15 minutes every morning to go for a walk, leave your phone at home, being mindful, getting that sunshine, being positive, thinking about your blessings, walking around the block, even if it's just 5 minutes, That's 5 additional minutes of activity that you can incorporate each and every day. And you don't need equipment to do that. So that can have positive effects on your mental health because of the endorphins released with exercise. And there's even something to be said about being grateful and having a gratitude journal, or even, meditation as you're walking around the block. Maybe you can take a moment to just reflect on all the wonderful things that are in front of you. There's something to be said about, again, connecting our mind and body. So when you can start the day with physical activity and exercise, it just gets things moving. It gets blood flow pumping, again, to your extremities and even to your brain. So wellness is really key. And it's more than just going out and being active. It's checking in with yourself. It's saying, how am I feeling today? And really capitalizing on that and looking at what your needs are, and hydrating, and making sure that, again, we're making that conscious effort to take care of ourselves coming out of this, because mental health should be a top priority, and wellness is a part of that. And I would say too, Ben, that wellness for you, for me, is different. So we all need to be approaching of things in an individualized way that works well for us, because just because it's stated in a magazine that it worked for one person doesn't mean it's going to work for you. So I think that for a lot of people, they need to be creative right now and step out of their comfort zone and try new things. Maybe take the stairs, right? Maybe they can walk instead of driving right now too. Cycling, again, getting the dog out for a walk. Any way to incorporate general movement is going to help support that wellness. And then in addition to eating whole foods and maybe getting back into the kitchen and cooking with the family.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think there's some very good points of wisdom there. And I know that the mind-body connection is very, very real, and something that shouldn't be overlooked by individuals across our communities and our state. Why don't we talk a little bit more about diet? Because there's a real connection to diet, and as you mentioned before, energy levels, performance, things of that nature. But another thing that's not really being talked about too much is metabolic health, and how much is what we're eating or our activity tying into some of the very real additional risk factors for individuals who were to get COVID, or frankly, any number of different ailments as they have to access the health system. What should people be thinking about? And could you speak to what diet really means beyond just what we're putting in our face, and what effect that might have on our general well-being?
Absolutely. So I always have to preface, especially nowadays, with context is key. Because as a registered dietitian, I do work with a wide array of clients, as far as, older adults, adolescent athletes, those looking to lose weight, general health, sleep. So in the context of those right now that are more sedentary and that are struggling to maintain a healthy weight, that's who we're talking about right now, with metabolic syndrome and disruptions within our metabolic processes, is that carbohydrates are often viewed as a comfort food, right? So before I get into that, actually, let me take a step back. So diet, right? Let's just talk about the basics and what food is actually for. So food and nutrition is meant to nourish our body, to provide us with fuel and energy to move and to support our organ, tissue function, growth, development, all of those things. So when we have a surplus of calories, we run the risk of having an energy surplus in which then we store and we gain weight. So that becomes disruptive of homeostasis, which can lead to metabolic syndrome. So when people are typically consuming too many calories, and it's often carbohydrates that are processed, they're low in nutrition, they don't contain fiber or nutrients, it's really easy to overconsume those things because our brain doesn't see the satisfaction with getting nutrients or fiber. So they're like empty calories, right? They're not satiating and they're not filling. So it's really easy to overindulge in them. So those are the types of things, your white foods, your white breads, chips, right? White pastas, cookies, things like that are really, again, high calorie, don't contain a lot of nutrition. We can overeat in those things. So that's where a lot of people can get into trouble with. Carbohydrates are high energy source. So that can lead to metabolic disruptions, right? When we have an imbalance of calories, we gain weight. And for a lot of people during the coronavirus, right, a lot of people were on the couch, they weren't being very active. And again, we were using food as a coping mechanism. So it ran the risk of increasing, being overweight, being obese, which we know is now connected with lower outcomes as far as recovering from COVID. And you have a higher risk of contracting that, right? Because it disrupts your immune system function, your ability to fight off respiratory infections. So it's kind of a loaded question, but I think, again, keeping context in mind, and that when we are consuming too many calories and the wrong calories in abundance, that leads to a slew of metabolic problems. And again, when we don't have our energy levels in check and we're feeling lethargic and we can't move, then we're also, leading into the next day of like, well, it doesn't matter what I did yesterday, nothing's going to change. And you just continue down this path. And it again disrupts your mental health, your wellness, your well-being, your relationship with food. And now nutrition is no longer a nourishing thing. It's more of a coping mechanism. So I think for a lot of people is we need to get back to the basics. We need to learn how to cook, getting back into proper fruits, vegetables, high quality proteins, maybe reducing and paring back the carbohydrates, because if you are somebody that is sedentary, you don't need that high energy source. You're not an adolescent athlete or an adult athlete that needs that ATP production from carbohydrates. So we can achieve our carbohydrate needs from starchy vegetables and even fruits with greater nutrition and more fiber. So Ben, when you talk about too metabolic syndrome, when we don't have fiber in our diet too, fiber helps slow the release of insulin from our pancreas, because that's what's drawing glucose into the cell, right? And with, having things rated on the GI scale too, the glycemic index, we want to have those lower GI foods because there's not only greater satiety, there's a slower insulin-like response in which the person can feel longer sustained energy versus the quick carbohydrates that people are not satiated with. So we need to just kind of get back to the basics and stop overcomplicating things. And I think that really begins with nutrition, right? And a lot of people could feel a lot better and have more mental clarity and well-being if they felt more empowered about the food choices that they were making and getting energy from the foods that they were consuming and not feeling tired. We're never supposed to feel tired upon consuming a meal, right? We should have more energy. So getting our portions back in check too.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack there, and you wouldn't be the first to accuse me of asking a loaded question either, by the way, just for the record. But I think these are very timely discussions. I particularly appreciated your comment about food as a coping mechanism. I wouldn't mind you talking a little bit more about that, and the idea of quick energy versus sustained energy and satiety, which, as I understand it, comes from more sources of healthy fat and things of that nature that might be more baseline energy providing than a carbohydrate, which is more kind of a quick burst type of energy. But maybe you could speak more to to those elements.
Yeah. So again, yeah, always a lot to unpack, but it's not that carbohydrates are bad, right? We need glucose. Our brain and our muscles need glucose to function, but making sure that it is more of a high quality carbohydrate. And when I say high quality, it's going to contain more fiber. It's going to contain more nutrients in which we have greater satiety with those things, right? Fiber slows the release of insulin, and we want that because that's going to help slow down and the transient time for digestion. So metabolic disruptions can occur when you're constantly having these high sugar, low fiber foods in your diet. And we know too, when you pair a carbohydrate with a protein, a good carb, that can also create satiety and it can slow the release of insulin as well. And fat, yes, there is less of an insulin-like response and it's higher calorie. It takes longer to digest fats. Of course, making sure that we choose the right fats, right? Our high quality, mono and polyunsaturated fats. So looking at things in terms of how can I slow down that release of glucose, because that's important, right? Because if we have a constant influx of that, then that's going to damage our cells. That's going to inhibit our ability to draw glucose into the cell and store it. So then it's going to be stuck in the bloodstream, and that's what leads to metabolic syndrome and diabetes. Right. So of course we don't want that. So it's getting things in portion and having a protein and a carbohydrate, a healthy fat, balancing our plate, Ben. So when we really, as dietitians, when we talk to our clients, and I don't work in the clinical setting, but I've had people come to me with weight loss questions. How do we build a plate? Well, according to the USDA, it's a whole grain, a fruit, a vegetable, a lean protein, and a dairy. I would argue that for the sedentary population, that we have a fruit, a vegetable, and a high quality protein, healthy fat, and then yes, our dairy as needed. That's what I would say would help, decrease obesity, those that are struggling with their weight, because many people just are not faring well with some of the recommendations out there. They're consuming a lot of carbohydrates, and it's often in the incorrect portion size. It's not just one slice of whole grain bread, it's 3 slices. And many people struggle with the satiety, right? Because they're not consuming enough protein. They've heard misinformation. So I think education and knowledge is power. So I think dietitians need to be out there having these conversations with great people like yourself, Ben, that have the ability to really get the information out there. Because I think our healthcare system is flawed in a sense that, we're more likely to put someone on a medication to help them manage their blood glucose levels than to just say, hey, let's look at our diet. Let's look at our exercise. Same thing with HDL cholesterol too. Exercise is the number one influencer of HDL cholesterol. So it's our good cholesterol. So instead of putting somebody on a statin, why don't we talk about our exercise? Let's talk about our diet. So just things like that. And I get super passionate just like you, but
Yes.
we need to have these conversations. We need to help people. We need to make a difference and not just push pills at them.
You're so correct as you're talking about the idea that there would be some intervention uh, which accounts for something that we actually are taking in rather than going to the source, right? And I hear a lot of guys talking about low T as and that the idea of low testosterone. And you know the answer to this, of course. One of the most effective ways you can get your testosterone humming is to exercise more. To spur that activity within your body. But then we kind of are in an area where what are you going to give me, doc? There's going to be some pill for that, right? And I think that's an important point. It might be a little bit of tough love, but that does speak to some personal responsibility on some of these items. Some of them are going to be inherent challenges that you simply are going to need these interventions for. But how much can a person behaviorally affect some of these situations? That's a very good thing to bring up, and I'm glad you did. Now, when we talked about, you talked about food as a coping mechanism. I know there's certain effects that happen. Let's just talk about sugar for a moment. What happens to the body with sugar, and then you've mentioned colorful plates. I want you to go into that too.
Great. Yes. I'm sorry. I realized I got off on a tangent. I didn't really address your question. So using food as a coping mechanism. Yes. So many people are, let's just put it in terms of I'm stressed, I'm feeling overwhelmed in the pandemic. Maybe there's financial challenges. Those parents too that are staying home with their kids to ensure that they're getting their education met. That's stressful. So they turn to food because you get that quick, immediate oxytocin, dopamine response from those high sugar foods. And your brain recognizes that and it craves that. So it knows, oh yes, Johnny, I'm feeling stressed right now. Everything seems like it's on fire. And I know that for 12 minutes, I can go over there in the kitchen and I can consume whatever's available. And it's often, again, high sugar, low nutrient dense foods. So you feel that quick response and it's like, yes, you just for a moment, you feel like you're in control and you feel really, really good. But then also you tank at the end. So then you have this cycle and your brain recognizes though, for that brief moment, you felt good in that moment. So it's going to tell you that, oh yeah, go to the kitchen, grab that bag of chips, grab those cookies. We can get through this with the food. So that's where people are using those coping mechanisms. So it does, like you said, requires personal responsibility to say, hey, while that may make me feel good for that brief period of time, it doesn't actually correct the underlying problem. It's a mechanism in which I'm using to cope right now, but it's not treating the underlying problem. Let's get to the origin of it is I'm stressed, I'm overwhelmed, I have not had great nutrition, my brain is releasing endorphins for the wrong things. I need to release those in a positive way with exercise, with managing my stress, maybe meditation. There are other coping mechanisms that we can participate in order to elicit that same response that we would from those high sugar foods. So when we're introducing sugar in excess, again, it just sends off signals throughout our whole body. We're going to have greater inflammation when it's processed sugar, especially. And even in our oral health, that's going to be also negatively affected. We're going to feel low energy. We're going to feel fatigue. And then also, again, with your pancreas having to secrete so much insulin, it's basically sending a cascade of events that are negatively going to affect your health and affect your organs' ability to function correctly. And then also, when we have constant high blood glucose levels, that runs the risk of blood clots. And then even too, for people that are pre-diabetic, they can even lose their vision and their sight. And it can give you headaches and it can disrupt your sleep. And again, it puts you at risk for diabetes, cardiovascular disease. And these are all things that are preventable by diet and obesity. We should not have 2/3 of the population being obese, right? If we're able to work on some of these lifestyle and behavior modifications, sugar is not bad, but we need to par it back and say, to what extent can we have this treat? How many treat days do you need to have, right? We need to be honest with ourselves, and we need to be adults, and we need to learn how to cook. And we need to look at our food as an opportunity to nourish our bodies and to respect our temple, because we only get one body. And we need to make sure that we understand that sugar is not the primary source of nutrition, right? It's our macro and micronutrients and our vitamins and minerals, which we can help, reduce inflammation from sugar and offset those responses by incorporating, broccoli, spinach, leafy greens, good sources of fruit. So again, yeah, I get passionate about it too, but we've got to have these difficult conversations about what's a positive coping mechanism, and how do we say, okay, I've been on the sugar train for way too many days. Again, getting into, well, I'm just treating myself. And then you have the other things, like you'll say, maybe the dad bod and stuff like that, but we're setting examples for our kids too. We're teaching them that it's okay to just have sugar all the time and not to have proper nutrition. And that's not a good example either. Our kids are watching us. Are role models. We've got to teach them that we get energy from eating high quality foods.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are some wonderful points. And I think this kind of broadly gets us into another topic, which is, let's say that a person says, yeah, I do comfort eat. I do look out for some of these very high energy calories, even though I may not be in a position to be able to take in those calories and then expend them through activity. But I feel good when I eat. And it's when I'm stressed, I do certain things. What would be some healthy alternatives to gain the same type of kind of mindful moment, if you will, without it necessarily being tied to this habit of snacking or whatever it might be that could lead to some of these challenges that you've talked about?
Right. And if they were my client or patient, I would ask them, let's check in with ourselves. What are you really, upset about? Why do you feel that you're doing this? It's kind of like the person that's upset at someone who cuts them off. They're not really angry about the person that almost hit them. They're angry about something else at home. Maybe it's a stress, it's a financial. Just asking them and checking in with them, hey, what's really going on here? How can we work through this, and identifying different ways to de-stress? In a time in the past, asking them, how have you been successful? What have you done to manage your stress? And oftentimes they'll say, I go for a bike ride, I go swimming, I go kayaking, I go canoeing, I sit in the woods, I take a walk. Okay, let's capitalize on those things. How can we incorporate that in, when the alarms are going off and you're feeling stressed? How can we make sure that you participate in that instead of, sugar or snacking, things like that? Being mindful and having those barriers set in place that we don't do that, and that we do this, and this is the optimal way. And if they, have a spouse or their family, how can they hold them accountable, right? We got to have a SMART goal. We have to have accountability. We have to have parameters set in place. So if we do fall off the rails, how do we get back on track? So that's what I would say to that.
Very good. So let's talk colorful plates before I forget that one, because it's a great concept that you
Yes.
proselytize quite a bit. So please talk about colorful plates.
Yes. So obviously, Ben, all science aside, instead of talking about antioxidants and proteins and carbs, I just say, guys, let's make our plates colorful. So on social media, I take a picture of all the food that I'm making. It's often spinach, broccoli, onions, colorful carrots, tomatoes, bell peppers. We know all the great antioxidant properties and all the anti-inflammatory functions, right? Our antioxidants function as NSAIDs. So instead of taking that Advil or aspirin, we can get those same effects from colorful fruits and vegetables. So I just try to, really promote that, because people remember that, right? It's always like a surplus of information when you're on the web, but what can I really do to drive home that, hey, we need to have a colorful plate? And it takes all the science away, and it just says the more color, the better. And again, portions, people are so confused on, well, how many should I have? A cup, 2 cups? I say eat as many fruits and vegetables as you want. Let's make that plate colorful. The greater the color, the greater the nutrition. A colorful plate is a happy plate. A colorful plate leads to a healthy body. So if you look down and all you see is brown, we've got to recheck ourselves, right? And we got to make sure that there's color on that plate. So around the holidays, many people will often say, oh no, I've done too many potatoes or too many, slices of bread. And that's a great thing that you can remember is if I'm looking at my plate and there's not color on it, it's probably not the best plate and I can do better. So how do I make it as colorful as possible? So the greater the color, the greater antioxidants, takes away all the guesswork, the portions, and just say, hey, I need to have color on my plate at every single meal.
Yeah, that's a great rule. That's a great rule. Let's talk about exercise a little bit. We've touched on it somewhat, but I'd like to get from you kind of thoughts for exercise. What does exercise look like? I've done this myself over the years, and I see others too, where I feel there's kind of an unfair expectation placed on people on what does success look like with exercise, and many people just crash and burn. They may make an initial pivot toward these healthy habits, but they go at it full on, or they have certain expectations that aren't met right away, or they have societal pressures that just crush them down. What do you see as sustainable exercise habits?
Yeah. First and foremost, Ben, just like any habit, right? When we're first starting out, we've got to start slow. We can't just go, 0 to 100 miles per hour. We're going to get injured. There's a lot of crazy workouts out there too that many people don't have the mobility, the flexibility to do. And, they aren't even starting with, a lap around the block, and they're expected to go do all these squats and exercises that they have no concept of doing, which is very scary to me as a trainer too, because I don't want my clients to get injured. I don't want people to participate in an activity level that they're not ready for. So we've got to work up to that. So first and foremost, if you're brand new to exercise, start with walking around the block every morning for 5 minutes. Getting your heart rate up is the best place to start. So taking the stairs in your house, you can, walk up and down the stairs 5 times. And if you're getting your heart rate up, that's exercise. So obviously a little bit is good, more is better. And we know that. So it's starting small, because small changes lead to big results. So I would say for a couple of weeks, start with just getting that habit done. Start walking around the block for 5 to 10 minutes and then increasing that. So now your 10-minute walks turn into 30-minute walks. And then maybe you can start doing some body weight exercises, some body weight squats, right? And doing some planks, doing some lunges in your driveway, journaling on those things, making sure that you have a plan in place, just like any other goals, right? We can't just expect to achieve something without starting with that habit. So first and foremost, create the habit, then start building upon it. But we need to make sure that we get that heart rate elevated, because we need to decrease cardiovascular risk, diabetes, the risk of obesity, all these other things. We can do that by just general walking, body weight exercises, getting our heart rate elevated, even doing jump roping at home too. Push-ups are great. Doing pull-ups at your local park is wonderful too, for those that don't have access to a gym. But addressing society standards, it's expected, right, that people are out there training for hours on end, and that's ridiculous. We can be very healthy by just doing 30 to 45 minutes of general activity each day, right? The American Heart Association recommends 150 minutes of exercise every single week for adults. So kids need more. They need 60 minutes every day. So again, just creating the habit, getting our heart rate elevated, doing what you can with what you have where you're at, and starting small and then growing upon that, and focusing on our own lane, right? Swimming in our own lane and not comparing yourself to anyone else. What can I do today that I didn't do yesterday? And it's just starting there and being positive and stretching. And if you're feeling sore, take a rest day, right? We don't want to do too much too quickly and injure ourselves, because then you're going to be discouraged altogether. And then hiring a coach, maybe someone that can guide you along the way if you are new to exercise.
Yeah, great insight, certainly. And I know there's professionals that are able to guide people, and I think it's great we have such varied options. It's just we're coming off a time where many of these options were not available to people. So the type of advice that you're giving on practical personal habits that just become kind of your own peaceful moments, that walk around that block. I mean, I'm not someone who walks. I certainly don't jog or anything, but I've taken more walks during the stay-at-home order and things of that nature, and I did find them very cathartic. And it was surprised even me, that it was so helpful as a kind of bridge from one point of the day to another point of the day. So I appreciate that a lot. Now, the next thing I've got for you, I'm going to be attentively listening to myself because I'm not doing this well and haven't been for years. But let's talk about sleep a little bit. This is an often missed thing. We've talked about diet, we've talked about healthy habits, exercise, but how many people do not have sound sleep discipline, myself included? You know, we drive ourselves, we drive our body, we might even be making some of these changes for health and wellness, but then the very thing that would allow that renewal each day may be getting missed.
Yeah, absolutely, Ben. We're all guilty of this. I think too, just tying the exercise component into it as well. People that tend to exercise more tend to sleep better. So it's great that we're talking about this now. With sleep right now, it's really challenging because people are stressed out. They're worried, right? We have the anxiety of what's going to happen tomorrow. We're facing really challenging times right now with the unknown creating a lot of anxiety and even animosity within our lifestyle. So it's really important that before bed, we set up a routine. First and foremost, going to sleep at the same time, and then also waking up at the same time, setting expectations that I'm going to place my cell phone, my iPod, my iPad, all of my electronics are going to be outside of the bedroom by 9:30 p.m. and that I get into bed at 10 o'clock and hopefully I'm falling asleep by 10:30, 11. For a lot of people that face kind of the anxiety and the stress of like, well, what's going to happen tomorrow? I would encourage those to place a pen and paper by their bed so that they can record or journal anything that may create any stress that they're worried about, right? I have it down on paper now. It's out of my head, it's out of my sight. I'm going to give it to God and I'm going to allow him to work on these things while I get a restful night of sleep and I restore myself. Because when we're sleeping, that's our brain's opportunity to reduce the plaque within our brain, to recycle, to repair, to replenish, recharge the batteries for the next day. So most people can get great sleep if they make a conscious effort to set a routine, right? To also limit your eating and drinking around bedtime, ensuring that you're not having any high fat, spicy, high sugar foods within 2 hours of bedtime, and then even reducing fluid intake, because if you're getting up every couple of hours to go potty, that's going to disrupt your quality sleep, right? And quality is more important than quantity. So many people could be in bed for hours, but if they're able to get good quality sleep, deep sleep, that's going to be more beneficial in the long run. So even if you are getting into bed a little bit later, if you're getting quality sleep, that's going to be much more beneficial. And we get that quality sleep by, again, having great nutrition, being hydrated throughout the day, getting exercise, plenty of movement, again, having a reduced intake around bed, even doing some meditation, some stretching, some belly breathing, diaphragmatic breathing around our sleep is also going to help create a nervous system response going into the parasympathetic, which is our rest and digest. So again, that's why I say not having food around bedtime is key, because our nervous system, our autonomic nervous system, has two branches, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. So when we're going into that, high intake of high fat foods, high sugar foods close to bed, we are not going to be rest and digest. We're going to be focused on trying to, absorb and digest those nutrients, and the blood flow is going to our stomach instead of our brain and our other tissues. So it's going to disrupt your sleep. So again, just having that routine and making sure that you've had all of your meals prior to, well, early in advance, again, with fluids, and then even limiting high intense exercise around bedtime as well. Some general walking is good, but we really want to focus on slowing our heart rate, our mind, right? So that's why I say meditating. If you are stressed out about work, write it down, get it out of the bedroom, create a good dark, cold room as well. Soft sheets, sleep is something that's worth investing in. Get whatever you can as far as, a good quality pillow, good blankets, soft sheets. Create an environment in which you're able to be at peace and go to bed. And then again, waking at the same time as well. Sleep is just one of those things that people don't really understand how valuable it is until they don't get enough of it. And then that leads to, again, a lot of negative effects on our mental health and wellness. All of what we're talking about, Ben, is all connected. Yeah. And it starts with sleep. So we know too that those that get better, deeper sleep tend to have a better mental health. And when we have a more positive mental health, we can make better decisions within our nutrition as well. Those that don't sleep well tend to make less optimal nutritional choices too. So if those of you are out there that are listening know that when you don't sleep as well, you tend to crave donuts in the morning more or high sugar cereals. That's because you didn't get a great night's sleep. So we're able to make better decisions when we sleep better, not only in our nutrition, but also in our job with our children. We tend to have a longer fuse too. We're able to be more patient with ourselves and with our family members when we sleep well.
Yeah, I've certainly seen that. You've also mentioned the concept of mindfulness and gratitude journaling and things that would be maybe trying to address the restless mind. I know that my biggest challenge is rumination at the end of the day. Things are running through my mind as I'm trying to sleep, and I'm thinking about scenarios, thinking about circumstances, and that's always been the barrier for me and probably many others too. Why don't you talk a little bit about that, some of the mindfulness things as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So, a part of the mindfulness too is controlling your controllables and understanding that, okay, what are the things that I can control and making a list of them? And in that process, a byproduct is that you're more mindful of, wow, these are the things that I'm doing. I'm doing actually a lot of things. And some of those things that I'm writing down right now, I can't control any of those. And then you kind of, take a step back and you say, wow, my list actually is not as long as I thought. So when you're getting it down on paper too, you're able to see an illustration of these are the things that are bothering me. In my head, they seem like they're much longer and much more, extravagant than what they actually are. So being mindful of what are the stressors, what are the things that I can control. I'm kind of looking at it, Ben, when I talk with my clients about this, it's a brain dump. Let's get it all down on paper. Let's dump it out, kind of like trash. Let's take out the trash. Let's sort it out. Let's see what we have here. What can we actually control? And what can't we control? And also, what are we grateful for in the process? Because when we're able to be more grateful, it's a mindset shift. It's controlling our controllables. And when we're more grateful and we practice our gratitude, we just tend to be more positive about those things. And we say, hey, I am actually doing a really great job, or you know what, that's been bothering me for some time, but I can't do anything about it, or I am being proactive about it. So it allows your brain to kind of relax, and then the stress comes down, the cortisol reduces, we have more neurotransmitters that are functioning in a positive way when we associate gratitude. So I know Oprah Winfrey, she created a gratitude journal for months and years on end. She had really challenging times growing up too. So for her to be able to focus on and meditate on the things that are great in her life, it just allowed her to be positive and to work through those challenges, because we all have challenges, right, Ben? And they're not going to go away. And sometimes they can feel like they're coming at us even harder right now. So that's why by journaling and meditating on these things, we have the ability to sort them out on paper and to really see the illustration of what am I in control of? What can't I control? What can I do moving forward? And just getting it out of your mind, dumping it out on paper, allows you to have more rest and just to say, hey, it's out of my control. And again, then it shifts also our mindset to being more positive. So a great picture too that's out there I've seen on the web many times is there's two people on a bus. One is looking out the window to the right and one is looking out to the left, right? And one sees sun and one sees dark. So we're all on the same bus, right? But our ability to see things differently is about our mindset, right? Because there will be dark days, but if we can see the light right at the end of the tunnel or the storm, we know that there's a rainbow coming. That allows us to work through those challenges and we can overcome them in a more positive way.
Wonderful advice, and those speaks to a mindset that's willing to listen and learn. And as we've seen with recent tensions and real concerns that people are bringing forward in recent days, those types of mindsets are all too needed in seeking to understand others' points of view and their experiences, which may differ very greatly from your own. So uh, timely words for sure. Um, as we talk about things that might be a bit more socially related, and speaking to stigma in particular, obviously we've heard of the concept of fat shaming. Culturally, it's a rather loathsome situation that people run into who are, just being targeted because of their weight, and assumptions being made about their ability to just fix it, or why aren't you doing this or that, even though, as we've talked about before, there's actually things that are warring against their efforts each day on some of these things when you have to deal with obesity and so on. So I'd like you to talk about that a little bit. And then you have a particularly unique perspective as well on the other side of the spectrum. You've achieved a level of of health and fitness that is quite striking. You know, you're quite lean and vascular in appearance, and I know that that's actually led to some harshness that you've faced, which is another concept, which is fit shaming. So there's these two sides to the coin, you know, and I'd love to hear your insights on that.
Excellent. Yes. So it did cut out for some of that, but I think I caught the majority of it. So first and foremost, just being positive. That's really what I'm all about, is empowering people, empowering men, women of all ages, of all sizes, to be their healthiest, best self. So I think it's important that we love ourselves and that we nourish our bodies, and our plates should reflect that, our physical activity, our lifestyles. But sometimes, we tend to overindulge, and it can lead to poor behaviors and habits that, sometimes can lead us feeling not so motivated, and maybe, more desiring to sit down and to just kind of rest and sit in front of the TV. And that can lead to bad habits. And again, in our society right now, I would say that, Ben, just going back to how it used to be, we used to be more active on the farm. There was way less technology. There was no social media. So people were outside, they were playing, they were working on the farm. They ate, they didn't worry about calories. They just ate because they had to. They worked really hard. They expended many calories. So back then, everybody was really lean, right? You had farmers that were working day on, day in and day out, and they didn't ever have to worry about portions. They weren't obese. They weren't facing some of the crazy things that we're facing today. So I think that there's a level in our society that it's okay, right? It's okay. The normal now, unfortunately, is being overweight. It is being obese, just because of the way our society has shifted. And again, that's not me picking on anyone. That's me saying that we have so many things at our fingertips, convenience. You can order your food now. You don't even need to go to the store to get it. You can have it delivered. You don't even need to leave your house. So that there's less activity, there's less movement, there's less calories being expended, overall less energy. And we have a surplus of convenience foods too that are being prepared. So a lot of people are not cooking anymore. So unfortunately, it's led to this lifestyle shift of it's more acceptable to be overweight and obese. And on the contrary, I would say that for many people, they just say, well, I'm trying to love myself, and you don't love me at this state, if you will. And I would argue, again, out of respect, that you should love yourself enough to take care of yourself, to be a healthy weight. Again, we don't need to be a size 0, but we need to be a healthy weight, because we need to be a good role model for our youth, for our family members, right? A part of loving ourselves is taking care of ourselves. It's nourishing our bodies with good, high quality nutrients, with physical activity, with mindfulness, with good sleep. It's not because we need to look a certain way because of society. It's to say, hey, I love myself enough that I'm going to take care of myself. So that's why I pride myself so much on wanting to live a healthy lifestyle and wanting to inspire others. It's not to say, hey, look at how lean I am, or look at what I'm doing. It's, I grew up, been out in the country again, and I worked really hard. My family, we did rock picking. I've done all of the outdoor activities. I was a college athlete. I used physical activity as my stress outlet. But also, I know how important it is that I eat well, because I know that when I don't eat well, I feel terrible. And I don't like to feel terrible. I like to have a lot of energy. So by nature, the more energetic that I am, the better I can help other people. So I view that as God giving me gifts of skills and abilities to empower other people to demand more of themselves, and to say, hey, I am worthy of eating good food. I am worthy of loving myself. And how I love myself is by nourishing myself and taking care of myself for my family. I can't tell you how many moms out there too that they need to put themselves first more, because you can't pour from an empty pot. And when you don't take care of yourself, and you become less healthy, you become less available to your family. And again, it's not about being selfish. It's about saying, hey, if I want to help other people, I've got to help myself first. And how to help myself is to exercise, to eat well, to sleep, to check in with myself, to manage my stress levels, right? I do get really fired up about that, because in society today, there's this shaming of, fit or fat. I argue that, calling someone fat or obese is horrible, and it's completely unacceptable. to make someone feel bad about their weight. So I would argue the same thing to those saying like, well, you're, super skinny, or you need to go eat a cheeseburger, or gosh, where do your organs fit? I think that's absolutely horrible. And that's going against the grain of saying we should all love ourselves, right? So by society, if we're going to love ourselves, a, a high level of loving ourselves is nourishing ourselves. It's taking care of ourselves. And, the way that my body is, that's my business. It's no one else's business. But again, I want to empower people, and I want to say that, you know what? I love myself, and I want to take care of myself, and whatever that looks like on the scale doesn't really matter, but I do need to be a certain level of health and wellness in order to be around for my family, right? When we're obese, we're overweight, we're not taking care of ourselves, we have a reduced quality of life and a reduced life expectancy, in which we won't be around for our family, right? So you talk about loving yourself. Well, if you want to love yourself, you need to start with loving the food you're putting in your body and looking at it from a nourishing standpoint. So I will jump off my soapbox here,
Yeah.
but I would just.
Yeah, it's a tough concept. And I appreciate you being willing to offer your opinion on them. I would follow up, I guess, and just say, what would be your message to someone who's faced shaming, or those who have put forward good faith efforts to try to become healthy and have been frustrated over and over again? What would be your message to those who continue to struggle, or those who've been victimized here?
Absolutely. So I would say, honestly, we're all in this together, and make sure that you surround yourself with good, positive people. There's a lot of people out there that are out to rain on your parade. And oftentimes, again, they are dissatisfied with their own lifestyle in some regard, or they're unhappy mentally, physically, internally, in which them wanting to lash out at you is not a reflection of you. It's often a reflection of them. Because honestly, Ben, positive, happy, healthy people would never want to dim someone else's light. That, putting someone's candle out does not make mine shine any brighter, right? So those people are not in it to support you or to encourage you. And I think there's a level of understanding of our circles, and, you surround yourself with good people because we become like the people we surround ourselves with most. So making sure first and foremost that source and that information and who that's coming from, maybe you don't even need to take that or internalize it. So if someone is shaming you, they're making you feel bad, those aren't the type of people you want to be around, right? We want to try and seek out good, healthy, positive people that support the life we're trying to create, right? So I would say that. And then also just, again, checking in with ourselves and being mindful of what we're saying to other people. And again, not projecting onto others. So if you're feeling, unhappy about your own life, I think it's really important that we don't project that onto others, and that, it's contagious, our attitude, our mental health, those things like that. So I would say for anyone out there that's struggling right now too, if you have a flat tire on the side of the road, right, you don't slash the other 3 tires. You repair the one, and then you keep going forward. So if you have a night where you overindulge, that's okay. Tomorrow's a new day, and you can start right now. You don't have to start next week. You can start right now, right where you are with what you have, and we can repair that tire, and we can keep moving forward, because it's about a journey and not a destination. We're going to get there, but how we get there is more important than when we get there.
Great advice. And, some of this that you've talked about to me is, I wonder if as a society we've kind of lost perspective of what the body's natural state is. What is the optimal state of the body? I made some very basic dietary changes some time ago, and not with a goal of weight loss. Actually, it was spurred by my own realization of how much sugar was in my children's diet, the special needs children with dietary restrictions, and they can't just sit in a dentist chair. So we're looking at outpatient, surgical suite settings, which is very imposing. And there was some damage that had been done, and the amount of sugar in the normal stuff they were eating was quite profound. But in the process, kind of through osmosis of adopting some of those changes and being more mindful of what was in the food, I did lose weight, a substantial amount actually. In recent, it's 30 pounds, I think, from my height, if you will. And as you've talked about, lower energy and just depression and these other things, I definitely see a difference in my mindset as the efficiency has gone up in a physical sense. So this mind-body connection, I think those are great things that you're talking about. I think that the encouragement, the flat tire metaphor, concentrate on the root and don't let that cascade out to other things, as we see kind of that multiplication happen. So we're getting toward the end of our time, and I think it's important for those who have gotten a lot of information, in this hour. If you had somebody in front of you
Yeah.
for just a short time and you wanted to offer them your best advice, what would it be?
Yes. So best advice is eat the rainbow, right? Create a colorful plate, get in physical activity every single day, focus on what you can control, create a good routine around regular meal patterns, getting good quality sleep, as we talked about too, limiting your screen time. Again, it's just kind of creating a lifestyle that supports the future you want. So being healthy and being mindful, creating a gratitude journal. So we did talk about a lot of things today. So just tying all those things back in, it is truly about a mind, body, soul connection. And that all begins with wellness, right? And that you don't have to be a size 0. You don't have to have a rigid diet. You don't have to cut out carbs. You don't have to do anything extravagant or ridiculous. You just have to start small and start creating healthy habits. And really just within your family, talk about at dinner, what do we want our lives to look like? What is our healthiest best self? That's what I always ask people that are sitting in front of me for the first time. What do you want your healthiest best self to look like, and how can we get there? What can we do right now to focus on that and to support what you're trying to create?
That's great. And as you said that too, it sparked a memory that I had, is that just over the time of this kind of these habit acquisitions and the changes, your body will start to show you what it wants. I mean, there were certain foods
Yes.
that I don't even have an interest in anymore that were certainly desired items before. Your body will start to tell you what nutrients it's looking for. And there's a certain instinctive thing now. It's kind of interesting how you allow the body's natural processes to kind of take charge again and say, okay, I'm kind of in need of this nutrient. And so you got this, you get a healthy craving for something that might be more calorie dense, or as you said earlier, foods that are as close as possible to their natural state. So I'm eating a lot of pickles lately. I don't know what that's about, but maybe I just need salt,
Yeah,
and
salty hydration in
yeah,
the hot temperatures. Yeah.
so there's things like that, and then there's different ways to kind of still capture that rainbow of flavor and still have it be foods that might be more nourishing and dense. And it's interesting to me how that's been kind of unleashed, and I hear others say that once they've allowed their body to kind of clear away the clutter, if you will, that they start to have those kind of natural processes towards seeking nourishment. And I think the same goes for exercise too. Once you've established a habit, there's a certain anticipation. You feel your energy start to rise before you ever get into that weight room, because you're getting ready for that, or the jog or whatever it might be. You're getting ready for that activity, and your brain is associating good things with that. So thank you for those observations. So we're going to have some things in the show notes, certainly about some resources to you. I don't know if you have anything that you can say right now as how best people could reach you if they want to connect with you.
Absolutely. So I am very active on social media. My Instagram is Nutrition with Wendi. I promote a lot of, colorful meals with high quality proteins, of course. I also have a website, nutritionwithwendi.com. I have blogs on there. I have an opportunity to set up a consult or schedule a screening process with me too. So if you are looking to make some lifestyle changes coming out of the pandemic, whether it's for yourself or even your young child too, learning healthy habits at home, I do have a consult opportunity on my website. And then also you can reach me on Facebook too. I have a page where I share everything as well. So depending upon what social media outlet you would like, or just general website, I am reachable. And I love talking with people about getting in more color, more physical activity, general health and wellness. So please reach out to me on my website or even my email, Wendi@nutritionwithwendi.com. And I'm so grateful to have been here today, Ben. I'm proud of you and all of the great changes that you've made within your health. You're such a role model, and for your family and for the people of Michigan as well, and for others that are tuning in. So I think it's incredible that you're able to connect the dots and really be, a great example of what it's like to be healthy and to make those changes. So I'm so proud of you, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to speak.
Well, I appreciate that, and yeah, she's living. For those of you watching, she's living by example, because she's providing that affirmation. that is encouraging. And as just she says, surround yourself with positive people that have your back and that care for you. And Wendy's been someone that I've come to know in recent months, and a source of affirmation, and seeking to bring positivity and joy into those encounters. So appreciative of what you're doing, which again is a calling as much as a profession. And for those watching, this is our first segment like this, where it's just more of a discussion. Nothing here should be taken as medical advice or legal advice. It does not substitute a direct relationship with a wellness professional, a health professional, all the boilerplate that you hear in these types of things. But what it does do is it offers just a broad perspective from Wendi in her professional capacity as to some things that we should be thinking about now. As our state's opening back up safely and responsibly, we have the opportunity to have this moment in time be one of clarity and change, potentially, for health and wellness, or we can go right back to perhaps some of the habits and things that we were in before, in a very cluttered culture, much inputs, a lot of information, a lot of causes of stress, and so on. So, Wendi, thank you for your time and the very quality observations that you've offered here today. We will have show notes that will have some additional resources, and anything that Wendi sends along that might be additional study resources and things of that nature will be added to that. And we were, again, talking with Wendi Irlbeck, registered dietitian nutritionist. I'm Ben Frederick, and I want to thank you for watching today. And again, Wendi, thank you.